Don't worry about it. At your age, aches are normal, just lie still." The words landed hard, and then the man in the white coat was already turning away, his shoes tapping down the hall. Eleanor lay there staring at the ceiling, her mouth half open, the question she'd tried to ask still stuck in her throat. Eleanor Vance was 84. That morning, she'd been reaching for a book she'd read a dozen times before, standing on her own 2 feet in the house she'd kept for decades. Now she was flat on a narrow hospital bed, hip shattered, gown thin as paper, wondering how a simple fall had erased her voice so quickly. She pressed the call button. Nothing happened, or maybe it did, and no one came. Around her, the ward moved on. Carts rattled. Shoes squeaked. Nurses whispered at the desk and lowered their voices when they passed her door. Nobody met her eyes for long. Nobody stayed. She tried to explain the tightness in her chest, the strange pressure that made it hard to breathe. But every time she spoke, someone cut her off with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. "Let the doctor handle it. He knows what he's doing. Try to rest." The doctor came back once. He didn't sit. He didn't ask how she felt. He flipped through her chart like she was a chore he wanted finished. When she reached out, not to grab him, just to stop him, he stepped back. "We'll deal with complaints later," he said. "Right now we have other patients." That was when Eleanor realized something cold and frightening. In this room, in this place, being quiet and old meant being invisible, and whatever was happening inside her chest was getting worse. As the door closed again and the hallway noise faded, one thought settled in her mind, heavy and clear. If no one is listening now, what will it take to make them hear? The city of Silverwood sat on the edge of a great river, a place of tall buildings and quiet neighborhoods. Like many places, its hospitals struggled. They were busy, always pushing to do more with less. For most people, a hospital visit was a stressful event, a place of fear and hope. But for some, it became a place of silence, where voices got lost. Eleanor Vance lived a quiet life in one of Silverwood's older tree-lined streets. She was a woman of 84 years, her silver hair always neatly pinned, her hands still nimble from a lifetime of knitting and gardening. She had a sharp mind, a quick, dry wit that surprised people who didn't know her well. Her days had a gentle rhythm: morning tea, crossword puzzles, a call to her daughter Sarah in the evenings. Eleanor was fiercely independent, managing her home with grace, refusing to be seen as frail. She treasured her routine, the simple dignity of her own space. Her daughter, Sarah Jenkins, was a federal appeals court judge. Sarah's life moved at a different speed. Courtrooms, legal briefs, complex cases that shaped the lives of many. She was known for her clear thinking and her commitment to justice, traits she'd inherited from Eleanor. But no matter how busy she was, Eleanor remained the center of her private world. Sarah had been away for a week, handling a case in another state, a necessary trip that weighed on her, leaving Eleanor alone for the first time in a while. The fall happened on a Tuesday morning. Eleanor was reaching for a book on a high shelf, a favorite novel she wanted to reread. Her foot slipped on a small rug. She went down hard, a sharp crack echoing in the quiet house. Pain shot through her hip. She tried to move but couldn't. The phone was just out of reach. Hours passed. The sun moved across the living room floor. Fear, cold and steady, began to set in. Finally, a neighbor, noticing Eleanor's curtains hadn't opened, came to check. The ambulance arrived soon after. At St. Jude's Hospital, Eleanor was just another elderly patient admitted through the emergency room. A broken hip. She was moved to a wing known for its long-term care, a place of hushed halls and a faint smell of disinfectant. Her room was small, a single bed, a window looking out onto a brick wall. She felt like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong box. The nurses were kind enough, but always rushed, their faces tired. Dr. Marcus Thorne was assigned to her case. He was a man with sharp features and an air of perpetual hurry. He carried himself with the weight of someone who knew he was important, surrounded by people he deemed less so. Dr. Thorne's first visit was brief. He walked in, clipboard in hand, barely glancing at Eleanor. "Broken hip. We'll schedule surgery," he stated, not asking. "Just informing." Eleanor tried to speak, to ask about the recovery, to mention her slight heart condition, but he cut her off with a wave of his hand. "All standard. You're an older patient. These things happen. We'll get you patched up." His tone was cold, dismissive, as if her age made her concerns irrelevant. He spoke over her, not to her. Eleanor, usually so articulate, felt her words catch in her throat. She was a person, not a procedure. But in his eyes she was just another number, another bed to clear. She lay there, small and helpless, the hard mattress beneath her, the doctor's back already turning as he walked out. Her dignity, a lifelong companion, felt bruised and alone. Eleanor watched the hospital world move around her. The doctors made their rounds quickly, leaving a trail of hurried instructions. Nurses moved from room to room, their steps brisk. No one seemed to have time. Days blurred. Dr. Thorne visited her room less and less. When he did, his questions were always the same, rote and without real interest. Eleanor tried again to express her discomfort, a dull ache in her chest that was growing worse. She mentioned her history of heartburn, hoping he would connect it to something more serious. He just nodded, not really listening. "It's just anxiety from the fall, Mrs. Vance, common with older patients. Try to relax." He prescribed a mild sedative. Her pleas for attention, for a deeper look at her growing discomfort, were met with the same cold indifference. He saw her as an old woman complaining, not a patient with a specific, worsening symptom. Her physical state began to worsen, subtly at first, then more obviously. She felt weaker. Her breathing became shallower. Her appetite vanished. She tried to tell the nurses, but they just recorded her complaints and relayed them to Dr. Thorne, who in turn dismissed them as post-surgical malaise. The nurses seemed caught in the middle, overwhelmed by their duties, unwilling to challenge the doctor. They saw Eleanor's decline, they witnessed Dr. Thorne's perfunctory care, but their hands felt tied. The hospital culture was clear. Doctors were in charge, and questioning them was not encouraged. Eleanor felt herself fading, a slow, quiet surrender to a system that simply wasn't seeing her. Her once sharp mind became foggy, her usual wit replaced by a quiet, constant fear. She knew something was seriously wrong, but her voice had been taken away. Her condition, once manageable, slipped into a dangerous, preventable decline, simply because no one with authority truly listened. One afternoon, Eleanor overheard a conversation between two nurses outside her door. They were talking about Dr. Thorne. "He just doesn't care about the geriatrics," one whispered. "Always pushing them out. Says they're a drain on resources." The other sighed. "It's how things are here, isn't it? The older ones get shuffled through." Eleanor felt a cold knot form in her stomach. It wasn't just her. This was how they saw all of them. This was the system. She tried to flag down a different nurse later, a younger woman who seemed a bit more compassionate. "I'm not feeling right," Eleanor said, her voice thin. "My chest, it feels heavy." The nurse paused, her brow furrowed with concern. She took Eleanor's pulse, then went to make a note on her chart. She mentioned it to Dr. Thorne during his rushed rounds that evening, suggesting a cardiac consult. Dr. Thorne barely looked up from his chart. "It's been noted, keep an eye on her. Her heart is fine for her age. Focus on the hip recovery." He closed the chart with a definitive snap. The nurse hesitated, then walked away, her shoulders slumped. Eleanor watched, the glimmer of hope fading. The system had won again. Her specific, worsening symptoms were now just another vague complaint, dismissed by the authority that held her life in its hands. The path to proper care was now firmly closed. The pain in Eleanor's chest sharpened. It wasn't the dull ache anymore. It felt like a heavy stone pressing down, making each breath a struggle. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trying to escape. She pressed the call button, her hand trembling. It felt like forever before a nurse arrived, a different one this time with wide, worried eyes. Eleanor tried to speak, but only a gasp escaped her lips. The nurse saw the grey tint to Eleanor's skin, the sweat beading on her forehead. Panic flickered in the nurse's eyes. She shouted for help. More nurses rushed in. Alarms sounded softly from the monitors. A flurry of movement. A code was called. Dr. Thorne arrived, his usual hurried pace now replaced by a sharper urgency. He saw Eleanor, pale and struggling, connected to new machines. He barked orders, his voice tight. This was no longer a vague complaint. This was real. A senior cardiologist, Dr. Evans, was called down. He took one look at Eleanor's vitals, the readings on the machines, and shook his head. "She should have been seen for this sooner," he murmured, loud enough for Dr. Thorne to hear. Dr. Evans immediately ordered new tests, more aggressive treatment. Eleanor was moved to a different wing, a place for urgent cardiac care. The immediate danger passed, but the line had been crossed. Her health had taken a grave, irreversible turn because of ignored warnings. Sarah Jenkins returned from her judicial trip late that evening. The first thing she did was call the hospital. Her heart sank when she heard Eleanor had been moved. She drove straight there, the city lights blurring past her. She found her mother in the cardiac unit, hooked up to an IV, her face drawn and tired. Eleanor looked smaller, weaker than Sarah had ever seen her. The vibrant spark in her eyes was dimmed. Sarah sat by the bed holding her mother's hand. Eleanor squeezed back weakly. "Sarah," she whispered, her voice rough. She recounted everything: the fall, the dismissal, Dr. Thorne's coldness, the growing chest pain, the feeling of being invisible. She spoke of the humiliation, the fear, the certainty that she was being ignored because of her age. Sarah listened, her jaw tight, her mind already racing. She saw the trauma in her mother's eyes, the deep hurt that went beyond the physical pain. This was more than just a medical error. It was a violation. Sarah looked at her mother's chart, then at the face of Dr. Thorne, whose name was listed as the primary physician. She felt a cold anger building inside her. She knew she had to act. She had to understand how this could happen. She asked for copies of all medical records, a formal request that now made her a specific institutional presence in her mother's care. The urge to confront Dr. Thorne was almost unbearable for Sarah. Her training as a judge, however, taught her patience and the need for evidence. She knew that an emotional outburst, even a justified one, would be easily dismissed. She needed facts, a clear understanding of the hospital's protocols and a pattern of behavior, not just a single incident. So she kept her true identity hidden. She presented herself simply as Eleanor Vance's daughter. She spent her days at the hospital observing. She watched Dr. Thorne with other elderly patients. She saw the same hurried movements, the same dismissive tone, the same lack of eye contact. An elderly man in the room next door complained of dizzy spells. Dr. Thorne told him it was just part of getting old. A woman with dementia was confused and agitated. Dr. Thorne ordered stronger sedatives without trying to understand her distress. Sarah took mental notes. She saw the tired resignation in the nurse's eyes, the quiet glances they exchanged when Dr. Thorne left a room. She felt the heavy atmosphere in that wing, a silence of unspoken concerns. She could have raised her voice, demanded answers, pulled strings, but she decided to wait, to observe more, to gather concrete examples. Her mother's recovery, though slow, was stable in the cardiac unit. This gave Sarah a small window. Her decision to remain silent, to play the role of the worried daughter, was a calculated risk. It bought her time to understand the system, but it also meant enduring the frustration of seeing others potentially suffer the same neglect. This choice to wait intensified her internal emotional burden, even as she became more aware of the institutional flaws. Sarah's quiet observation extended into weeks. She became a familiar face in the hospital, always by her mother's side, asking gentle questions of staff, listening to conversations in the waiting rooms. She saw the stress in her mother's eyes, the lingering fear from the near crisis. Eleanor needed constant support, physical and emotional. Sarah found herself missing court dates, postponing important case reviews, declining invitations to legal conferences. A major federal appeal she had been preparing for months, a case that could have advanced her career significantly, had to be handed over to a junior colleague. The chief judge had expressed his disappointment, a polite but firm reminder of her professional obligations. Sarah understood the cost. This was a real, concrete sacrifice, a setback in her career, a financial strain. But every time she saw her mother's fragile hand in hers, every time Eleanor recoiled slightly when Dr. Thorne walked by, Sarah knew it was worth it. Her commitment to justice, usually reserved for the courtroom, now focused entirely on the quiet indignity unfolding in the hospital. Her silence was a shield, allowing her to collect information, but it came at a heavy personal price. Her professional trajectory, once clear, was now on hold, a direct consequence of her unwavering presence and hidden investigation. Sarah continued her quiet work. She spent hours in the waiting areas, striking up conversations with other families visiting elderly patients. She introduced herself simply as Eleanor's daughter, concerned about her mother's care. People, seeing her steady presence, began to open up. A son told her how his father, recovering from a simple procedure, had developed a severe bed sore that went unnoticed for days. A daughter described how her mother's medication schedule was frequently missed, leading to confusion and distress. Many stories mirrored Eleanor's: a doctor who rarely listened, a sense of being rushed, a general feeling that their loved ones were treated as less important, less deserving of attention. Sarah listened carefully, making mental connections. She noted the names, the dates, the specific complaints. She saw the same tired resignation in these families' eyes that she had seen in her mother's. They felt powerless, just like Eleanor had. The hospital administration noticed Sarah. She wasn't loud, but her steady presence, her quiet questions, began to draw attention. A hospital patient advocate, Ms. Davies, approached Sarah one afternoon. Ms. Davies was polite, her smile tight. "Mrs. Jenkins, we understand you have concerns about your mother's treatment," she said, her voice smooth. "We assure you Dr. Thorne is a highly respected physician. He followed all protocols." Sarah felt the familiar wall rising. Ms. Davies offered to review Eleanor's chart with her, but the explanation was always the same. Everything was done by the book. No apologies, no acknowledgement of error, just a calm, bureaucratic defense. Sarah knew this dance. It was the system protecting itself. A carefully built fortress of paperwork and carefully chosen words. She saw the subtle warning in Ms. Davies's eyes. Stop digging. But the stories of the other families echoed in her mind. Her mother's quiet fear. She couldn't stop. The institutional defenses were now fully engaged, trying to shut down her quiet investigation before it even officially began. Sarah tried reaching out to former hospital staff, but it was like trying to find ghosts. Most had moved on, scattered to other cities or other professions. Those she did manage to contact were hesitant, fearful. They had signed non-disclosure agreements, they said, or feared retaliation that could ruin their careers. One former nurse who had worked on Eleanor's wing agreed to meet Sarah in a coffee shop far from the hospital. The nurse, Maria, looked over her shoulder constantly, her hands trembling as she held her cup. Maria spoke in hushed tones, confirming Sarah's fears. "Dr. Thorne, he's always been like that with the older patients," Maria confessed. "He calls them bed blockers or resource drains. He'd rush through rounds, dismiss their complaints. We nurses saw it, but what could we do? He was a senior doctor. If you spoke up, you were branded a troublemaker. Your shifts got cut. You just learned to keep quiet." Maria looked at Sarah, her eyes full of guilt and fear. "I saw how he treated your mother. It wasn't right, but I had a family to feed." Maria handed Sarah a crumpled piece of paper with a name and a phone number. "Call this person. He might help you. He kept everything." With that, Maria stood up and hurried out, leaving Sarah with a new lead and a deeper understanding of the fear that kept people silent. The risk to Maria for even speaking to Sarah was clear, solidifying the institutional power Sarah was up against. The piece of paper led Sarah to Robert Hayes, their former administrative assistant who had worked in Dr. Thorne's department for years. Robert was an older man, close to retirement when he left the hospital, dismissed for what he called disagreements about patient care. He lived in a small apartment across town, surrounded by boxes of old papers. He was bitter, but his bitterness was rooted in a sense of injustice. He had seen too much. He invited Sarah into his cluttered living room, offering her a glass of water. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said, his voice raspy. "Someone always does. It just takes the right person." Robert had been meticulously documenting Dr. Thorne's patient interactions, his dismissals of symptoms, the patterns of early discharge for elderly patients who then quickly readmitted with worse conditions. He had kept copies of internal memos, unsigned but damning, that pushed for quicker patient turnover in the geriatrics wing to meet financial targets, even if it meant compromising care. He even had a recording made on his old small tape recorder of Dr. Thorne openly joking with another doctor about how these old folks just take up space until they finally kick the bucket. Robert pulled out a worn briefcase, its latches rusty. Inside, neatly organized, were folders bulging with dates, names, incident reports, and the small, heavy tape recorder. This was the proof Sarah needed, concrete and undeniable. It changed everything. The silence of years was now shattered by tangible evidence, a shift in power from the hidden abuser to the seeker of justice. Sarah sat there, looking at the folders, listening to the crackling recording. The doctor's voice, dismissive and cruel, filled the small room. It wasn't just a few bad choices, it was a pattern, a systemic problem, protected by the very institution meant to heal. The weight of it settled on her. Her mother's suffering was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger, colder machine. Sarah felt a surge of cold fury, but also a deep sense of purpose. Her judicial mind, trained to weigh evidence, to build a case, saw the full picture now. This wasn't just about Eleanor anymore. It was about all the nameless faces, the forgotten patients, the silenced families. The choice to act was no longer a question. She had the evidence, she had the stories, she had the courage of Robert and Maria, who had risked their own safety and reputation. She closed the briefcase, the sound of the latch a final, firm decision. She looked at Robert, her eyes clear and resolute. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "This changes everything." The information was no longer just anecdotal. It was a solid, verifiable record of abuse, enough to build a powerful case. A public exposure was now not just possible, but inevitable. Sarah carried the heavy briefcase, its contents a silent roar. She walked into the hospital's administrative offices, no longer the quiet, worried daughter. Her face was set, her eyes clear. She requested a meeting with the hospital director, Dr. Peterson, and the head of medical staff, Dr. Chen. She did not reveal her full identity, not yet. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. The hospital director, Dr. Peterson, was a man in an expensive suit, his expression practiced and smooth. Dr. Chen, a stern woman with sharp eyes, sat beside him. Ms. Davies, the patient advocate, was also there, her smile still tight, but now a hint of unease in her posture. Sarah laid the briefcase on the polished table. She began by recounting Eleanor's experience, her voice calm and steady. She described the fall, the ignored symptoms, Dr. Thorne's cold dismissals. Dr. Peterson nodded, a patronizing gesture. "Mrs. Jenkins, we understand your distress," he said, his voice measured. "But Dr. Thorne has an excellent record. We reviewed your mother's chart. Everything was handled appropriately." Ms. Davies chimed in, "We believe this is simply a misunderstanding, an emotional response to a difficult situation." Sarah felt the familiar wall. She looked at Dr. Peterson. "Is that so?" she asked. She then opened the briefcase. She pulled out the neatly organized folders. She started with Eleanor's original medical records, comparing them to the altered versions she had obtained, highlighting discrepancies in nurses' notes that had been overwritten or removed. She then presented the dozens of other patient complaints, gathered from families in the waiting room, each one echoing Eleanor's story. Finally, she placed the small old tape recorder on the table. "This," she said, her voice cutting through the suddenly silent room, "is Dr. Thorne's own voice." She pressed play. The crackling recording filled the room with Dr. Thorne's casual cruelty, his jokes about bed blockers and old folks taking up space. Dr. Peterson's face went pale. Dr. Chen's jaw dropped. The carefully built defense of the hospital crumbled. The proof was undeniable, a concrete shift in the fight against their institutional power. Sarah then revealed her federal appeals court judge identification, a final, unarguable statement of authority. The room went silent, a heavy quiet that pulsed with shock and sudden fear. Dr. Peterson stared at Sarah's ID, his smooth demeanor shattered. Dr. Chen averted her gaze, her face suddenly grim. Ms. Davies looked like she'd seen a ghost. They knew they were no longer dealing with an emotional daughter. They were facing a formidable legal mind, armed with irrefutable evidence. Sarah laid out her demands. Dr. Thorne's immediate suspension, a full internal investigation into the geriatrics wing, and public acknowledgement of the systemic failures. Dr. Peterson, now scrambling, tried to regain control. "Judge Jenkins, we assure you we will look into this. We can handle this internally." He spoke of protecting the hospital's reputation, of avoiding unnecessary scandal. Sarah met his gaze unflinching. "Internal investigations have already failed," she stated. "The evidence speaks for itself. This is not about reputation, it's about accountability." She informed them she had already filed a formal complaint with the State Medical Board, complete with all the evidence she had just presented. The official process had begun, leaving the hospital no choice but to respond. The complaint was now a public record, an irreversible act that forced the institution into the light. News traveled fast. The State Medical Board launched its investigation, sending a team of inspectors to St. Jude's Hospital. The local news channels picked up the story, eager to cover the federal judge who exposed elder neglect in a prominent city hospital. Other families, empowered by Sarah's actions, came forward, their stories now amplified, their voices finally heard. They shared their experiences with reporters, showing pictures of loved ones, holding up hospital bills. The sheer volume of complaints created a public outcry. Dr. Thorne was immediately suspended by the hospital, a public removal of his power. He found himself facing not just an internal review, but a formal hearing before the medical board, his career hanging by a thread. He was seen leaving the hospital, his face drawn and pale, surrounded by news cameras, no longer the arrogant doctor. His once-held power had evaporated, replaced by public shame. The medical board hearing was a tense, somber affair. Sarah testified, her voice clear and precise, detailing Eleanor's suffering and the pattern of neglect. Robert Hayes presented his meticulously kept records. Maria, the former nurse, found the courage to speak, her testimony confirming the culture of fear and dismissal. Other families, their faces etched with pain and anger, told their own stories of loved ones dismissed and dehumanized. Dr. Thorne, appearing with his lawyer, tried to defend himself, but his excuses sounded hollow against the mountain of evidence. He mumbled about busy schedules, about the challenges of elder care, but the recording of his own cruel words played again, echoing through the hearing room. The board deliberated for days. Finally, their decision came. Dr. Marcus Thorne's medical license was permanently revoked. He was stripped of his right to practice medicine, a complete and irreversible end to his career. The hospital, facing public backlash and potential lawsuits, was fined heavily. They were forced to implement sweeping changes in their geriatrics department, new patient care protocols, mandatory empathy training for staff, and an independent patient advocate office with real power. Dr. Peterson, the hospital director, resigned shortly after, his position untenable. The system had been forced to change, a costly and public admission of its failures. Eleanor Vance eventually returned home, frail but alive. Her recovery was long and difficult, marked by physical therapy and quiet days. The memory of her humiliation, the fear of being unheard, lingered in her eyes. Sarah continued to care for her. The bond between them deepened by the battle they had faced. The fight had taken its toll on Sarah, too. The demands of the investigation, the emotional weight of her mother's trauma, the time away from her professional life had left their marks. She returned to her court, but some part of her had changed. She saw the world with new eyes, a sharper awareness of the vulnerable, of the silent battles fought every day. The scars of the fight remained, a quiet testament to the price of seeking justice. But in the restored dignity of her mother, in the changes at the hospital and in the voices of those who were finally heard, Sarah found a profound, if bittersweet, victory. The simple act of presence, of unwavering advocacy, had shown the enduring power of family and the lasting impact of memory in shaping a more humane world. When silence protects abuse, telling that story is already justice.